Certainly the issue of history and some contradictory parts of our common history with Poland will overshadow our relations not just at the moment and in the future as well. Until after we decide to settle this in the most constructive way. I don't welcome this appeal of the civil society to the parliament to symmetrically answer on the decision of this Polish Sejm, calling the events that took place in the 40s as a genocide against Polish people and committed by the Ukrainians. By the way, at that time they were citizens of Poland, and from the legal point of view and the political point of view, it was a civil war going on the territory of Poland, not because of Ukrainian state that at that time didn't exist. So I believe that the Ukrainian answer should be asymmetric. We should divide two processes. Political process, which is more important at the moment, to focus on the common enemy at the moment. But the most important thing is that we have common values, and we got the same picture of future, the favorable future for both nations. So politicians should concentrate on how to develop our strategic partnership between the nations, and to leave all these disputes to the historians and the activists debating in the round tables within Ukraine and certainly with the Polish colleagues. I think, first of all, Ukrainian civil society and the scientific society needs to present this solid idea, solid vision of these contradictory events of our bilateral history. And after that, we can forge the common political ground and positions to talk to the Polish colleagues. That's one thing. And second thing, we should separate political process, which should serve the interests of both nations, to the historical ones. So the asymmetric response to the decision of the Sejm will be to separate two processes, to begin the, not to begin, but to continue our talks with the Polish expert society on these issues and to find a common ground. We should take an example of France and Germany and their reconciliation after the Second World War as an example. And we remember that the Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Adenauer, he tried to show that he sincerely regret what the Nazi Germany done to the French, and he went to the reconciliation, seeing the future of Europe united, and it was actually the laying ground of the contemporary European Union. So we should take an example of Germany and France after the Second War as an example to mend our relations with Polish. Well, actually, massacre of Volhynia, certainly Russia is an enemy of Ukrainian as well as the Polish state. It's trying to divide our nations. It's trying to divide the Polish nation itself. They are trying to use the sentiment of the far-right groups, anti-European and certainly anti-Ukrainians, just to make a shaking ground for the foreign policy of Poland towards Russia, towards the European Union. And I see no success of such a thing, simply because for majority of the Polish people, they believe that Russia is a bigger threat, and it confirmed in the centuries of history, and especially divisions of Poland. And majority of Polish people see what the policies of Russia is being pursued in Ukraine, in other countries, and that's why I see no future of such attempts of Russians to divide our two nations. Certainly there is a Polish agenda towards Ukraine, I mean the historical issue, simply because we've got another asymmetry. There is no single political force in Ukraine that can use its anti-Polish sentiment to get to the parliament or general public support. Vice versa, in Poland, there are some political forces, including those in the parliament, who are using and just fueling this anger against Ukrainians just to get political bonuses.
You mean sorry, President's Party?
Yeah, including the President's Party and some more far-right parties, nationalistic parties, who are just using this subject just to get more support from.
So it involves President Duda as well, I take it.
Yeah, and just
what's
no, not he is fueling, but he is fulfilling the policy, and he is agreeing with the policy of those who are fueling. In fact, when he was in Kyiv after the common statement of two presidents, when they addressed very diplomatically the issue of the dividing history, he visited the Archbishop of Kyiv and Zhytomyr, and he provided this Archbishop with a cross dedicated to the victims of the massacre, as they call in Ukraine. So it means that the president is pursuing this policy. It's in his interest, in the interest of his party. So we will see this issue appearing in our bilateral agenda. But the most important thing that we got more in common. It's interesting that the president of Poland visited the quarter century of Ukrainian independence, and he was present at the meeting of Ukrainian ambassadors with the president. And in his speech, he outlined the three pillars of the foreign policy of Poland that we could completely agree on. First is the rule of law, rule of international law, and adherence to this principle. Secondly, non-recognition of the spheres of influence. When the bigger nations are deciding for the smaller nations, their fate and the condition in which they live. And thirdly, the transatlantic and European institutions is the core of peace and stability in Europe. It means that Ukraine, willing to join the NATO and the EU, will have a friend and ally within this organization in the face of Poland. It means that we see the future, common future of two nations. It means that we see the same enemy, the same enemies who are trying to divide Europe within itself and the United States from Europe. And these spheres of influence, the 19th century concept, are not acceptable for Ukrainians. Vice versa, Ukraine will be divided, Ukraine will be drawn back to the Russian sphere of influence. Otherwise, Poland will be feeling more threatened, even though it's a member of NATO and the European Union. So we see the core interests of two nations are the same, and we see that the majority of issues, we see them in the same way. And there are some dividing issues to appear in the bilateral agenda.